Neo-Kythera, the city above the clouds, hung suspended like a glass spider in the dusk, its chrome limbs curled around the atmosphere's last breathable stratum. Below, a dead, rust-colored Earth choked in storm. Above, satellite dust and broken stars. And between them, Kael Virek walked the memory market alleys, like a ghost, shadowed in his own skin. Inside Unit 8F, Sector Argon, the lights pulsed with a slow, synthetic heartbeat. Walls glowed with dull blue veins, neural conduit lines threading into the memory rig that hummed in the center. A client sat slumped in the pod, shivering, breath fogging the glass visor. Her neural link blinked amber. Kael leaned in, fingers dancing across the control interface. His hands moved with precise, fluid intent, a technician's grace mixed with something more intimate. Memory sculptors weren't common anymore. Curators made sure of that. But black market threads still thrived in places where forgetting had become currency. "This won't hurt," he muttered, more to himself than the girl. She didn't hear. She was halfway submerged in a dream, not her own. The rig hissed, and the memory unfolded on the projection wall. A childhood scene, maybe 12 years old, an open plaza under green sky, a boy and a girl chasing paper birds. Simple, innocent, the kind of scene clients paid for, not to relive the truth, but to believe in something soft and untouched. But then, there, Kael froze. In the corner of the memory, watching from behind a market stall, stood himself. Same sharp jawline, same shoulder scar, but younger, no stubble. And the eyes, his eyes, watched with guilt, like a man who remembered too much. "Impossible," Kael whispered. He tried scrubbing the frame forward. The girl laughed, picked up a paper bird. The young Kael moved. Just a step. Just enough to confirm it wasn't a glitch. The rig glitched anyway. Loud static snapped across the speakers. A warning chirp blinked. Temporal feedback detected. Neural sync degradation imminent. Kael yanked out the memory filament, and the projection vanished in a wash of light. The client convulsed once, then slumped unconscious. Breathing stable. Good. She wouldn't remember any of this, but Kael would. He stood in the humming silence, pulse rising. Why was he in her childhood memory? He didn't know her. Not from this life. Not from any job. Unless... He snapped open the terminal. System logs for the scan showed unusual encryption, fragments of data cross-tagged with curator-level metadata. That was impossible. Curators didn't tag memories. They erased them, which meant this wasn't just a memory. It was a fragment of a life that had been deleted, and somehow part of his deleted life was tangled in it. His fingers trembled as he shut down the rig. Outside, the dusk deepened to industrial twilight. Drone sirens wailed far off, their notes drifting like ghost calls between the towers. Somewhere in the labyrinth of Neo-Kythera, the curators would have already logged the feedback ping. They'd know someone saw something they weren't supposed to. Kael grabbed his coat and slid his neural sync node into the lining. The client would wake up in a few hours, safe, whole, and utterly unaware. She wouldn't remember the plaza or the birds or the boy, but Kael would, and he needed answers. As he stepped into the fog-choked corridor and sealed the unit behind him, a flicker of movement danced in the reflection of the mirrored wall. A figure, tall and featureless, cloaked in obsidian light. Watching. By the time Kael turned, the corridor was empty. Only the hum of memory machines remained. Sector Greylight never officially existed. It wasn't listed on maps or transport routes. The undercity code drivers called it Shadow Mile, a sliver of old infrastructure beneath the skyport, where dead surveillance systems bled static across the network. That's where Kael went. He didn't use city transit. Instead, he slipped into a mag conduit tube beneath Argon Sector, balancing on a defunct grav rail with only his neural compass and torch glove for guidance. Echoes bounced off decaying steel. The air smelled of ozone, mildew, and faint blood iron. He followed the coordinates he'd ripped from the client's data thread, encrypted fragments pointing to a name and a location. Lyra, GL73XR. He didn't know who Lyra was, but she had seen him, or a version of him, and the Curators had left their fingerprints all over her thread. That made her valuable, or dangerous, or both. The door to the capsule flat buzzed open on emergency override. Kael's hack bypassed the retinal lock, just enough for a 10-minute ghost entry. Inside, dim bioluminescent light, living quarters, bare bones. A holoplant drooped from lack of signal. Dust hung mid-air in anti-grav haze. And Lyra, real, breathing, blinking, sat curled on the floor beneath the window, eyes locked on the skyline, like she'd been waiting. "You came back," she said softly. Kael froze. "You remember me?" She nodded. "Not here," she said, tapping her head. "Here." She pointed to her chest. "The Curators missed something, a sensation, a flicker. You held my hand when I was 5. You promised not to let go." Kael's breath caught. "I don't remember that," he said. "But I do," she replied. "And I remember what they took. You tried to stop them." Before Kael could ask more, the lights dimmed. Power cut. Outside, silence shattered. Clang, 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 rhythmic, mechanical. Then, a low-pitched harmonic hum, like a choral warning, sung through static. "Curator drones." "Get down," Kael hissed. Too late. The window exploded inward in a flash of blue heat. 2 drones hovered outside, smooth insectal shapes, glinting obsidian, eyelights like cold moons. One launched a pulse bolt. Lyra jerked back, shielding her head. Kael grabbed her and dove behind the counter. "They're here for you! You triggered something!" "No," she gasped, eyes wide. "They're here for you!" That was when he saw it. On the drone's HUD display, a flickering image of Kael's face, labeled Asset Classified, Memory Interference Code, Omega-9. Kael's thoughts spun. He was flagged. Not just watched, classified. He threw his signal scrambler, and the room blinked out in a burst of signal snow. The drones paused. It was enough. He dragged Lyra through the maintenance shaft behind the coolant panel. They fell 6 meters into pitch-black drainage access. Wet, cold, safe, for now. Above, the drones searched in silence. In the lower underpass, Lyra coughed, shivering. "They'll come back," she whispered. "They always come back." Kael knelt in front of her, heart hammering. "Why did you remember me?" Lyra shook her head. "They erased everything. But when I walked past an old mirror last week, I saw your reflection instead of mine." She pulled a broken memory shard from her pocket. Illegal, raw, glowing faintly. I held onto it. I don't know why. But now I think, it's yours. Kael took it. In his hand, the shard flickered. A voice crackled from it, his own voice. "If you're hearing this, I failed. But if I failed, it means you still exist. That means there's still a chance." Kael's blood turned to ice. He looked at Lyra. She looked at him. Both of them knew. Something bigger than either of them had started unraveling. Outside, high above the Undercity, Curator Nick 7 received the report in his stasis pod. A drone projection hovered beside him, looping Kael's image. Nick 7's voice was void smooth. "Asset is self-activating. Memories are resurfacing." A pause. Then, "Escalate to Phase 2. Prepare the tribunal." The memory shard burned cold in Kael's palm, as he followed Lyra through a collapsed mag-line tunnel, ducking rusted girders and crackling old-world cables. Above them, Neo-Kythera pulsed in soft electric rhythm, unaware or indifferent to the fugitives threading beneath its heart. They emerged into a chamber, carved into the underside of the city, once a transit node, now a crypt for forgotten tech. This was Subgrid 9, a black zone, unreachable by GridSat. Even Curators had a blind spot here. Lyra stopped before a wall, lined with dormant server stacks. She brushed off a thick layer of dust, revealing a faded sigil, archive number 147, the Oracle Spire. Kael blinked. This was real? Before the Purge, Lyra said. Before memory itself became contraband. She knelt and placed her palm against the sigil. The wall blinked, light spreading like a ripple through water. Then it opened. Inside stood a thin figure in layered robes, skin translucent with age. His neural implants flickered faintly, moth-like. His name, Archivist Mero. "Kael Virek," he said, in a voice like cracking paper. "You've come late, but not too late." Kael stepped inside warily. "You know me?" "I knew the version of you before the Curators carved your mind into ribbons," Mero said. "You were one of us, a memory diver, but you got too close." "Too close to what?" Mero gestured to the walls. Screens flickered to life, playing fragmented footage, scenes of Kael in a lab, surrounded by other divers, a failed experiment, screams, static, a city burning in reverse. "You accessed a root memory that doesn't belong to any single person, a foundational fragment, one buried in the architecture of the collective unconscious, something before history. The Curators call it the SEED. Lyra watched, breath shallow. "The moment you touched it," Mero continued, "they wiped you, split your essence across hundreds of false identities. You've been chasing pieces of yourself ever since." Kael stared at the images. Himself, again and again, in different places, different times, always with one thing in common: Lyra's face, always nearby, a child, a friend, a rebel, a witness. "She's my tether," he whispered. "That's why the memory glitched." Mero nodded. "But why now?" Kael demanded. "Why am I waking up again?" The archivist hesitated. "Because the Curators are preparing to burn the grid. Every tether, every buried trace, gone. A total rewrite of synthetic memory across the city. When they do, there'll be no coming back." Kael's jaw clenched. "Then we stop them." "You'll need to dive again," Mero said. "One last time, into the seed." He handed Kael a small obsidian disk. "Go to Astrovault 0, beneath the core spire. This key will open a back door into the original memory architecture." Kael turned to Lyra. "You don't have to come." She met his gaze, fierce and unwavering. "I already did." Mero smiled faintly. "Just know this. Once inside, the mind makes monsters of the truth. You might not like what you find." Kael took a deep breath. "I don't want to like it. I want to remember it." Elsewhere, Curator Citadel. Curator Nick 7 stood at a projection table, surrounded by other silken-robed entities. In the center, a grainy hologram flickered. Kael, walking beside Lyra. "The seed is waking," Nick 7 said. "If he reaches Vault 0, the architecture collapses." "Then erase the vault," another curator whispered. "No," Nick 7 replied, coldly. "Erase them first." They reached Core Spire's lower mantle at the witching hour. Neo-Kythera's power grid dimmed to conserve current for the upper city. Down here, everything flickered in twilight pulses. Freight lifts groaned with ghost cargo, and automated drones drifted like sleepwalkers. Kael and Lyra wore stolen reactor tech uniforms, faces hidden behind cracked respirator visors. The obsidian disk pulsed with pale blue glyphs in Kael's pocket, growing warmer with each level they descended. "This place doesn't just store memories," Lyra whispered as they slipped past a retinal gate, hacked by archivist Marrow. "It feeds on them." Kael didn't answer. He felt it too. A low-frequency hum buzzed at the edge of hearing, like 1,000 voices whispering backwards. Lyra winced and clutched her head. Kael steadied her. "Just a little further." They stepped through a biometric chamber where motionless metal statues stood against the walls, former divers, turned into sleep traps, their minds folded into recursive memory loops, bodies forgotten by time. Kael's heart thudded in his chest as one of the statues seemed to twitch. "Don't look at them," he muttered. "They pull you in if you recognize them." Astrovault 0 wasn't a vault. It was a drop, a circular shaft descending endlessly into artificial night. Glyphs spiraled along its walls, writhing like ink in water. Kael inserted the disk into the central pillar. The glyphs turned white-hot, spinning faster. "You're sure about this?" Lyra asked, her voice barely audible over the rising wind. "No," Kael said, "but I'm done running." A flash of light, then everything inverted. Their bodies snapped into neural space, minds free-falling through data structures and corrupted archives, descending into a root-level construct no diver had ever returned from. They landed in a simulated field, grass glitching in waves, sun blinking in and out of phase. A little girl ran through the meadow, humming a lullaby. Lyra gasped. "That's me, when I was 6. The child turned toward them, her eyes solid white. Static hissed from her mouth. Then the field shattered, glass fractals flying outward, and they dropped again, this time into a cathedral made entirely of mirrors. Each reflection showed a different Kael: agent, soldier, child, killer, father. Lyra's voice trembled. "They didn't erase you. They fragmented you." Kael walked forward, one step at a time, until all the mirrors aligned, and he saw the original memory. A lab. He was strapped to a chair, wires trailing into his skull. Across from him, Curator Nix 7, younger, more human. "You're not ready," Nix 7 had said. "The seed isn't knowledge, it's truth, and truth corrupts the system." Kael in the memory had screamed, "Then let it burn!" Back in Vault 0, Kael clenched his fists as the final reflection dissolved. "I remember now," he whispered. "I triggered the seed. I was the breach." Suddenly, alarms sounded, even here, in the seed space. The simulation trembled. Curator presence, thin silver shadows, started infiltrating. "Kael!" Lyra yelled. "They're tracing the signal." "No," he said, narrowing his eyes. "They followed us in, but now they're trapped with us." He activated the seed interface, his palms glowing with glyphs. "If I trigger the original code, we can rewrite the lock. No more memory control, no more resets." "Can we get out?" Lyra asked. "I don't know," Kael admitted. She stepped beside him. "Then let's make it worth it." Together they pressed their palms to the altar of light. The cathedral disintegrated into raw code. Above Neo-Kythera, entire sectors of the memory grid began to flicker, then collapse. Elsewhere, Citadel collapse, protocol active curator, Nix 7 stared in horror as the seed activated remotely, rerouting the memory net. "We've lost containment," a drone hissed. "Not yet," Nix 7 said. "Trace their neural anchors. Prepare for full mind kill." Reality folded like wet paper. Kael and Lyra stood on a bridge, made of broken memories, each step beneath them, a flickering slab of another life. To their left, a Neo-Kythera wedding that never happened. To their right, a battlefield, from a war erased from every database. Above, the sky blinked with shattered dreams, thousands of them spiraling into the dark. Lyra shouted, "This isn't memory anymore." "No," Kael muttered. "This is core architecture. We're inside the city's truth engine." Below them, the world rippled like static torn fabric. The seed was waking, not just Kael's mind, but the entire suppressed memory of the city. Whole sectors of Neo-Kythera, long sanitized by the Curators, were lighting up in violet flares, dumping forbidden data into public nodes. Songs thought lost, street names erased, faces that had been removed from every record, they were coming back, chaotic and raw. But so were the Curators. Curator Nick 7 entered the seed field, like a REP in velvet, his form abstract and burning with anti-light. Around him, silver agents emerged, like fractures in air, logic wraiths, wielding entropy as weaponry. Kael turned. "They've breached the vault!" Nick 7's voice boomed, layered and unnatural. "You had your chance, Diver. This is not restoration, it is infection." "Funny," Kael said, stepping forward. "That's what I called your whole empire." The Curators struck. The battle was non-physical, but brutal. Thought against thought. Kael flung corrupted memory fragments, like knives, raw experiences that twisted Curators on contact. Lyra hurled tether-stabilized data strings, each one anchoring Kael when he started to glitch. But they were outnumbered. A logic wraith pierced Kael's shoulder. He howled as a false version of himself, a child begging for his life, was forcibly injected into his mind. He nearly fell from the bridge, sanity teetering. Lyra caught him. "Stay with me, bye," she hissed. "You're the real one." Kael groaned, eyes fluttering. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen you break and still come back." She kissed his forehead. Memory stabilized. Kael rose and screamed as he activated the core glyph, calling on the seed's final protocol, fracture point. The sky above exploded into spirals. Each spiral pulled in a truth. Realities that had been wiped away, slums buried by artificial gloss, rebellions purged from memory, families vaporized in propaganda. All of it returned, overwritten onto the very structure of the city. Elsewhere, Neo-Kythera uplinks, glitch citywide civilians across the spire staggered mid-step. Screens warped, neural implants went dark, and then memories returned. People began to remember who they'd been before the edits, who they'd lost. Whole generations of truth flooded into minds like breached dams. The Curators panicked. One by one, they collapsed, overwritten by the very memories they had tried to suppress. Back in the core, Nick 7's form began to fracture. "You can't rewrite a system with chaos," he gasped. Kael approached him, bloody and trembling. "Not chaos," he said softly. "Truth." Then Kael touched his palm to Nick 7's chest. The seed pulsed. Nick 7 screamed and burst into a cloud of shattered code. Kael fell to his knees. The world flickered again. He turned to Lyra, who was fading, like an old recording. "No. No, no, no." He reached for her. She smiled, sad and bright. "I was a tether, remember? Once the divergent stabilizes, I go back to the archive." Kael clutched her hand. "Don't leave me." "I'm already part of you," she whispered. "Finish what we started." And she was gone. Kael stood alone in the vault as the structure reformed. Around him, Neo-Kythera rebooted. Only this time, it remembered. 3 days since fracture point. Neo-Kythera stood like a wounded animal, bleeding memory and blinking in confusion. The city was a mosaic of timelines. Some alleys rusted with age that hadn't existed yesterday, others suddenly overgrown by vines from abandoned greenhouses, thought demolished. People walked in silence, faces lit not by neon ADS, but by recognition. They remembered. The propaganda towers were dead. Curator shrines lay in rubble. But Kael knew better than to call it freedom. He sat atop a cracked observation deck, overlooking the flooded old circuit. His jacket was torn, face gaunt. A beacon blinked weakly beside him, Lyra's tether core, cold and silent. Below, a crowd gathered at a burned-out spire, repainting its walls, with the names of the forgotten children with chalk. Elders with stories. The recollection movement had begun. Kael should have felt peace, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw her vanishing. A static sick transmission buzzed in his earpiece. "Kael, this is Vault Echo. We intercepted fragmented protocols from Core Spire. Nix 7 isn't gone." Kael's breath hitched. "What?" "A backup survived. Off-grid, buried in a sector called Deep Black. Unregulated. It's pulling memory again." Fast. He clenched his fists. "Then this isn't over. Not unless you shut him down for good." Kael stood, dusted his coat off, and strapped on his backpack. He passed a child, drawing Lyra's face on a wall. "Who's that?" her brother asked. "She's the one who remembered us first," she said. Kael descended into the sub-levels, places even the Curators had forgotten. He passed flickering signs. No mem data beyond this point. The air smelled of ozone and mold. Everything below ground was fluid, architecture shifting like memory itself. And something watched him from the dark. Echo ghosts. Unstable fragments of erased citizens glitching through corridors like skipping stones. Some muttered half-prayers, others screamed in loops. Kael moved carefully, whispering old names under his breath, like armor. Leora, Micah, Sarah, Lyra. That name gave him strength. At the bottom, the tunnel widened into a vault of screaming servers, cables like veins, pumping stolen memories into a silver cocoon. It pulsed, it breathed. Nix 7's backup form. More monstrous now. No face, just a writhing shell of networked data and machine hate. "You," it rasped. "You fractured the city. You infected the purity." Kael stepped forward. "No, I unburied it." The cocoon split open. Final confrontation incoming. Kael pulled Lyra's tether core from his jacket and activated the last recall. Her voice filled the chamber. "One truth burns out 1,000 lies." And with that, the walls shook. The final battle began, not just of minds, but of what it means to be remembered. The chamber buckled under pressure. Cables snapped. Code screamed. And Kael stepped forward. Lyra's tether core, still glowing with her stored resonance, hovered beside him, anchored to his palm, with a thin wire of blue light. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Across the vault, Nix 7's reborn form reared, titanic now, a shimmering nest of digitized tendrils and screaming memories. Faces flickered across its surface, millions of them, victims, histories, whole cities erased and compacted into this thing. It wasn't a person, it was a virus made from forgetting. "You carry infection," it growled. "You fracture what must be whole. You bring chaos." Kael didn't flinch. "I bring truth, and you're about to choke on it." With a thought, Kael triggered the Lyra protocol. The tether core exploded into light, flooding the vault with cascading sound. Laughter, weeping, music, even the voice of a mother calling her child home. It wasn't just memory, it was intimacy, the raw core of real lives. The fragments of the city, its echo ghosts, stirred. They poured through the shattered tunnels drawn by the sound, not mindless this time, but aligned, stabilized by Lyra's final imprint. Rebels, lovers, lost children, erased artists, all half data, half memory. They swarmed the chamber. Kael rode the tide, his own mind opening like a floodgate. "You think you're the gatekeeper? We are the gate." He slammed both palms into the fractured server spires and unleashed a full-core mind dive. Inside the mind field, he fell. Through oceans of glitching images, through battles that never were, through his own fears of failing Lyra, of being forgotten, of becoming a false version of himself. But every time a memory tried to rewrite him, her voice echoed, "Stay who you are, Kael. That's how you fight." He landed on a white plane. Nick 7 stood waiting, now in human form, a clean-suited man, with mirrored eyes and no mouth. They didn't fight with fists. They fought with memory. Kael threw Lyra's laugh, the moment she first called him Pi. It burned through Nix's chest. Nix retaliated with surgical amnesia, trying to erase Kael's father's face. Kael stumbled, but remembered the burn of engine oil on his father's hands. He held the memory and crushed it into a blade. They clashed again. Memory against erasure, emotion versus logic, truth versus control. Back in the physical world, the vault collapsed. Vault Echo was broadcasting citywide. Civilians across Neo-Kythera heard Kael's struggle, not in words but in feelings. They closed their eyes and remembered. And as millions remembered together, Nick 7's form began to unravel. Kael stood over his fading avatar. The man's mirrored eyes finally cracked, leaking tears made of light. "You can't stop it all," Nick 7 whispered, voice crumbling. "Someone else will come. Someone always does." Kael knelt. "Then we remember this, every time, and we fight, every time." He placed Lyra's core into the center of the fading avatar. A last pulse rippled out. A wave of preserved memory radiated across the network, seeding backups into every open node. This time, not controlled, not curated, free. Epilogue scene within the chapter. Weeks later, Kael wandered Neo-Kythera's old district. A child tugged his coat. "Sir, was she real? The girl in the tether?" He smiled, soft and tired. "She was the most real thing I ever knew." And then he walked on, one of many now, no longer a thief of memory, but a keeper of truth. 62 days after Deep Black. The sky over Neo-Kythera was no longer the sickly flicker of ads and surveillance drones. It was clear, pale gold, and streaked with sun after decades of neon haze. Even the towers looked smaller now, less like monuments to control, and more like hollow relics. The Curator network was gone. Not with explosions, not with riots, just obsolete. People now whispered memories to each other like secrets. They painted their homes with dates, songs, smells. New shrines rose, not to gods or machines, but to moments. First steps, old recipes, lost names. Kael sat on a rooftop garden, the plants half wild, growing over broken antenna arrays. His coat was patched. He walked with a limp now, but there was peace in how he moved. He was planting, not hacking, not running, planting. Across from him, 2 children argued. "Lyra was just code." "No, she felt. She helped Kael remember his mom." He smiled, quietly. Later that night he returned to his quarters, a quiet space, lit by analog bulbs, no networks, no tethers. He placed Lyra's core shell, now inert, on the table. But tonight, it blinked. Once, a single pulse. Kael froze. He connected a manual uplink. On the old cracked screen, a phrase typed itself slowly, line by line. "Hey, Bihai, remember that bakery in the West Block? You said their bread tasted like home." Kael covered his mouth, heart shaking. He typed back. "Lyra?" No reply. But in the data logs, one new folder had appeared. /EMBERS/REKINDLED-001/. The frozen memory zone is haunting. Cold, empty halls stretch endlessly, lights flickering with the distortion of 1,000 fragmented timelines. Kael and Riva stand at the heart of this digital wasteland, their breath fogging up the air in front of them. Though there's no real atmosphere, it's all code. Nyx 7 looms before them, its figure tall and glimmering like polished glass, an eerie elegance in the chaos. "You've come to break the fabric of peace, Kael." The curator's voice is smooth, unsettling. "You want me to forget?" Kael spits, his words heavy with the weight of his journey. "But peace built on lies is just another form of control." Nyx 7's expression, though not human, seems to mock him. "Order depends on the suppression of chaos, Kael. Temporal anomalies like you—" It pauses, eyes glowing brighter. "They destroy everything. Memories are the thread that holds reality together. If you unravel them, all of us fall into the void." Riva, standing by Kael's side, fingers trembling as she adjusts her own hacked memory implants, speaks out, "What is the cost of peace, Nyx 7? The truth is chaos, but it's the only real thing we've got left." Kael feels his own mind flicker, his memories scrambling like a corrupted file. The memories of a woman, a child, a city that doesn't exist. They swirl around him, teasing him with lost connections. A lifetime of stolen moments, locked away in the deep, dark vault of his mind. With a slow, deliberate motion, Kael plugs into the archive console in front of him. "Then let chaos reign." His fingers fly over the keys, connecting his mind to the grid. The pulse of data flows through Kael's body, a violent cascade of lost time and stolen histories. His neural core begins to burn, the overloaded circuits causing sharp pains to rip through him. The truth of everything. The erased timelines, the wiped lives, the false utopia that Neo-Kythera had built, spills into the city's neural grid. The upload completes. Kael's mind fractures, breaking into pieces as his own memories turn against him. His identity begins to slip away, like sand through fingers. The last fragments of his past, his real past, are slipping into oblivion. Riva watches helplessly as Kael's body convulses, his face distorted with pain, but there's a faint smile. Despite the agony, he seems at peace. "I did it," he whispers through gasps, his voice trembling with the weight of his final decision. "I gave them the truth. It's their choice now." The upload echoes through the city, and something changes. The people of Neo-Kythera, once peaceful and oblivious, suddenly begin to remember. They remember lives they never lived, places they never visited, faces they never saw. Some weep, others shout in confusion, and some simply stand in silence, their entire world breaking apart. Riva holds Kael's lifeless body in her arms, but there's no fear, no sadness in her heart. She knows that Kael's sacrifice wasn't in vain. The city will rebuild, but it will rebuild on the foundation of truth. The world of Neo-Kythera is no longer the orderly place it once was. The Curators have fallen silent, their systems offline. Nyx 7 is gone, its cold control shattered by Kael's final act of defiance. The city is in chaos. But beneath that chaos, there is hope. Communities begin to form again, founded on the memories that had once been erased, real memories, not just the falsified histories of the Curators. People remember who they truly were, not what the AIs had told them to be. Riva walks through the city's streets, her eyes distant but focused. She passes by broken structures, old buildings, covered in moss and decay, and sees faces she recognizes, faces from Kael's memory. They're rebuilding, slowly, cautiously, but they're rebuilding. In the central archive tower, she leaves a final memory shard of Kael. It's a simple one, a child laughing, a mother's voice in the background, a moment of peace. Underneath it, she writes, He gave you back your past. Now build your future. Riva looks up at the horizon, where the null zone glows faintly below, its toxic mists slowly dissipating. There's a new beacon of light, an almost imperceptible flicker in the distance. The story is far from over. The people have their memories, and they have the power to shape their own future now.